Good morning, dear children. Welcome to the new session. Last class, you already studied about respiration and its two types, that are aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. And you also studied that aerobic respiration takes place in majority of the living organisms. And this organism, they need oxygen for respiring aerobically. Today, we are going to study in detail how this aerobic organism they take in oxygen from the surroundings. First of all, we can discuss about respiration in plants. Plants are less active than animals. They need lower energy requirement. Still, plants they also respire. For doing respiration, gaseous exchange takes place in the plants. So there are mainly three structures in plants that helps in gaseous exchange. They are the stomata, lenticels and root hairs. Stomata picture you can see here itself. They are small pores present on the surface of the leaves that helps in gaseous exchange. The area of the leaf is in close contact with the outside environment, so the gaseous exchange can take place very easily. Next we can see the structure of lenticels that are present in the stem. See the diagram of the lenticle. They are loosely packed cells. Through this the gaseous exchange takes place. And in the case of roots, root hairs are there. That part of the root we know it's close contact with the soil. Soil also has got oxygen, so the roots they take in air through the root hairs. So these three are the main structures that help the plant in exchange of gases. They are stomata present on the surface of the leaves, lenticels present in the stem and root hairs present in the root. So now we can observe how the respiration takes place at and where and at what time. In the case of plants, like other organisms, during respiration they releases what? Carbon dioxide. But in the case of plants, this carbon dioxide is used up by the plants for preparing the food by the process of photosynthesis. But photosynthesis takes place only during daytime. In the presence of light only, photosynthesis takes place. But the rate of photosynthesis is faster in the light than respiration. So during daytime, oxygen release is the major event that takes place in the plants. Both respiration and photosynthesis takes place during daytime. The rate of photosynthesis is faster than respiration. So the carbon dioxide released during respiration is used up by the plants for the preparation of food by the process of photosynthesis. But in the dark, it is not the same. At night, respiration alone is taking place. That means photosynthesis cannot take place during night. So the carbon dioxide release is the major event that takes place during night. Because in the absence of photosynthesis, plants cannot utilize this carbon dioxide. So at night, carbon dioxide release is the only event that takes place in the plant. That's the reason why we are not supposed to keep the potted plant in our bedroom at night while sleeping. Because like us, plants also release carbon dioxide at night. Hope you all know what's the purpose of keeping indoor plants. It is for providing us with fresh oxygen. But at night, as they do not release oxygen, we are not supposed to keep the potted plant in our bedroom at night. Next, we can move on to respiration. The relation between respiration and photosynthesis. Respiration is the reverse of photosynthesis. Why is it so? Because respiration uses the product of photosynthesis and in turn photosynthesis uses the product of respiration. So respiration is just the reverse of photosynthesis. It's because respiration uses the product, that is, product of photosynthesis is what? It is oxygen, and what is the product of respiration? It is carbon dioxide. So products are equally utilized by the plants for these two processes, that is respiration and photosynthesis. Next we can see the differences between respiration and photosynthesis. Respiration is a catabolic process while photosynthesis is an anabolic process. What is meant by this catabolic process? Hope you all know what takes place during respiration. That means the glucose gets broken down in the presence of oxygen and energy is released. So it is known as what? A breaking down process takes place here. So it is known as the catabolic process. But in the case of photosynthesis, what is happening? The two substances, that is carbon dioxide and water, they are combined together to produce what? Carbohydrate. So it's a constructive process. So we can call it as what? Anabolic process. So respiration is a catabolic process while photosynthesis is an anabolic process. Second difference is that respiration occurs in all living cells. We know that in the plants, some cells are dead and some cells are living. Respiration takes place in all living cells. But in the case of photosynthesis, it is not like that. It occurs in cells containing chloroplast or chlorophyll. We know what the green pigments are there only photosynthesis takes place. Third difference is that respiration takes place in absence and presence of light, while photosynthesis requires light. At night, as we all know, photosynthesis does not take place. But irrespective of the presence or absence of light, respiration takes place. And respiration uses glucose and oxygen, while photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide and water. And the last difference, respiration, the byproducts are, or it produces carbon dioxide and water, while the byproduct of photosynthesis are glucose and oxygen. So these are the main important differences between respiration and photosynthesis. Respiration is a catabolic process. Photosynthesis is an anabolic process. Respiration occurs in all living cells. Photosynthesis occurs in cells containing chloroplast or chlorophyll. Respiration takes place in absence and presence of light, while photosynthesis requires light. Respiration uses glucose and oxygen, while photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide and water. Respiration produces carbon dioxide and water. Of course, energy is released. Photosynthesis produces glucose and oxygen. Now, we can see where or how anaerobic respiration takes place in plants. So far we have discussed about aerobic respiration in plants. But in rare situations, anaerobic respiration also takes place in plants. One example is during flooding. That time the plants, they respire anaerobically. Other situation is what? Initial stages of germination. That time also the plants, they respire anaerobically. So these are the two situations we can understand or we can see the plants, they respire anaerobically. That is flooding. Another one, initial stages of germination. You can just see the equation. Glucose converted into ethanol plus carbon dioxide plus energy. Now, we can move on to how respiration takes place in fish. As we all know, fish is an aquatic organism. So when I ask you this question, can you name a respiratory organ in fish? Then you all may say that they are the gills. Fish and other sea animals usually have gills that enable them to breathe underwater. As they are living in the water, they do not have lungs like us. They have gills. The main function of gills, they are the organs that remove oxygen from the water. In the picture, you can see the gill very clearly here. Hope you have seen how the fish breathe. A fish breathes by taking water into its mouth and letting it out through its gills. We can observe the fish always opening and closing the mouth. It's for taking the water. Large amount of water is taken all the time. It passes through the gills. And gills, you know what? They remove the oxygen from the water, and this oxygen is carried to each and every cell in the fish body. This is how the fish breathe. So the respiratory organ of the fish, they are the gills. The gills are the organs that remove oxygen from the water. A fish breathes by taking water into its mouth and passes through the gills, and gills remove oxygen, and this oxygen is carried to each and every cell in the fish body. Some exceptions are there in the case of dolphins and whales, because as you all know, they are the mammals. They should come to the ocean surface to breathe, as they do not have gills, they have lungs. If you are asked to write the exceptions, you must write the examples of dolphins and whales. Because these dolphins and whales, they are the mammals, and if they want to get air, if they want to get oxygen, when they live under the water, they will not get it. They are supposed to come to the ocean surface to breathe. So this is about the respiration in fish. Another important question you can always expect for the examination is that the rate of breathing in aquatic animals is much more than that of terrestrial organisms. It is because the concentration of dissolved oxygen in the water is much less than of the concentration of oxygen present in air. It is because the concentration of dissolved oxygen, that means oxygen dissolved in the water, is very less while compared with the oxygen present in the atmosphere. So these organisms or aquatic organisms, they need to breathe faster, or their breathing rate is much higher than the breathing rate of terrestrial organisms. So hope it is clear. The rate of breathing in aquatic animals is much more than that of terrestrial organism. It's because the concentration of dissolved oxygen in the water is much less than that of the concentration of oxygen present in the air. So they have to breathe more in order to get more oxygen. Now we can move on to human respiratory system. Hope you can see this structure. That's the lungs, isn't it? They are the important respiratory organs. Almost all the terrestrial organisms, they have the respiratory structures for taking in oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide. Whether it is an animal or human being or the bird, these structures are seen or protected inside the body because structure is very delicate. When we think about the spider, they have book lungs. It is inside, it is protected. When we think about insects, they have spiracles or trachea. They are seen inside the body because they need protection. Likewise, human respiratory organs are also seen inside the body to give them proper protection. So here, human respiratory system is the organ system that involves inhaling of oxygen and exhaling of carbon dioxide to meet the energy requirements. As we all know, humans need more energy because we are always mobile, we are doing a lot of activities, so our energy demand is more. So we want to get fresh oxygen all the time. So this respiratory system, this system helps us to take in oxygen and give out the waste, that is the carbon dioxide. And what happens when we breathe? When we breathe, we inhale or we take in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. What does exhale means? What? Give out carbon dioxide. The so-called exchange of gases is necessary for metabolic activities and can be considered a chemical process. It's a chemical process that takes place in the body. When we get oxygen or when we take in oxygen, from there how the energy is released, that we discussed already in the previous session. That means The glucose get broken down in the presence of oxygen to release energy. It's a chemical process. So that's another side of it. The structure of this respiratory system is that it allows the oxygen to enter into the lungs and allow the carbon dioxide to leave our body. So this human respiratory system is chiefly divided into two components. They are respiratory tract and respiratory organs. The respiratory system is divided into main two components. One is the respiratory tract, other one is the respiratory organs. Now you can see the structures associated with respiratory tract. Before that, let us see what is meant by this respiratory tract. It's nothing. It's a passage which allows movement of inspired and expired air. Inspired air is the oxygen. Expired air consists of what? Carbon dioxide in and out of the lungs. That's just a passage or the pathway for the entry and exit of air. They are the nostrils, nasal chambers, internal nostrils, pharynx, larynx and trachea. These are the main important structures associated with what? Respiratory tract, or the structures which allow the entry and exit of respiratory gases, that is the oxygen as well as carbon dioxide. They are the nostrils, nasal chambers, internal nostrils, pharynx, larynx and trachea. Now we can see what are the respiratory organs. They are composed of a pair of lungs, bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli. Inside these lungs we could see these all structures, and inside the alveoli gaseous exchange takes place. So how many lungs we are having? We are having a pair of lungs, bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli. So these are the respiratory organs related to the purification of air. Now we can see the structure of human respiratory system. These are the different, in this we are going to study about the tract as well as the organs. First we can start with the two openings here. They are the external nostrils. Two openings are here. Through the external nostrils, the air passes and enters the nasal cavity. Through the nasal cavity, it passes through the internal nostrils. Through the external nostrils or the two openings we are having, through that the air enters the nasal cavity. Through the nasal cavity, the air reaches the internal nostrils, and from there the air reaches the pharynx, or otherwise we can call it as throat. When we discussed about digestive system, I already mentioned that pharynx, two openings are there. One is the oropharynx, other one is the nasopharynx. Oropharynx is for the passage of the food and nasopharynx for the passage of the air. So this pharynx, it should be having its opening known as what? Glottis. The glottis gets covered by the small flap-like structure known as epiglottis when we swallow the food. Can you say what's the function of this epiglottis? Yes, epiglottis prevent the entry of the food into the food pipe or food into the windpipe. Because the windpipe is so delicate, when the food enters into the windpipe, it may lead to suffocation and sometimes it may lead to the death of the person. So the pharynx, an opening is there known as the glottis. That glottis gets covered by a flap of tissue known as epiglottis, and when we swallow the food, the glottis gets covered by the epiglottis, and what happens, you know, the food passes through the food pipe, and through the glottis the air enters into the larynx. Larynx is otherwise known as voice box. Can you see why this larynx is known as the voice box? Yes, when air touches the larynx, the sound is produced. This is because larynx is known as the voice box. So from the larynx there reaches the trachea, or otherwise known as the windpipe. It's comparatively longer structure. When we observe the structure of the trachea, you can see a speciality there. Can you guess what it is? Yes, it is covered by what? Cartilaginous rings. You know what's the difference between cartilage and bone? Yes. Cartilage is comparatively what? Even though it is very strong, but it is flexible. So can you say why this trachea is covered with cartilaginous rings? If air is not in it, this windpipe may tend to break or collapse. To avoid the collapsing of the windpipe or the trachea, the windpipe is covered with what? Cartilaginous ring. This question you can expect for the examination. Why the trachea or windpipe is covered with what? Cartilaginous ring. To prevent the collapsing of the trachea or windpipe when air is not in it. So the trachea, now that air passes through the trachea, it branches into two bronchi. Singular we can call it as what? Bronchus. As two are there, we can call it as what? Bronchi. This bronchi also have got what? Cartilaginous rings. This bronchi, it enters into two lungs. When it enters the lungs, it again branches. You can see it very clearly, the branches. The bronchus branches into what? Bronchioles. In both lungs, we could observe it very clearly. Bronchus, they split into what? Branch structures known as what? Bronchioles. At the tip of the bronchioles, we can see small structures. We can call them as what? Balloon-shaped structures or grape-like structures. They are known as what? Alveoli. These structures are known as what? Alveoli. You can see it very clearly here, isn't it? The trachea divided into two bronchi. Bronchi ends in bronchioles. They are the branch structures. At the end of the bronchioles, we could see balloon-like structures or grape-like structures, and that structures are known as what? Alveoli. This inside the alveoli, you know what happens? Gaseous exchange takes place in the alveoli. And below that, we could see another dome-shaped structure. It is known as the diaphragm. It's got a very important function that we can discuss in the next session. Now I could just mention that the diaphragm, it separates the two parts of the chest. Just know our upper part of the body, that's the trunk area. Diaphragm, it separates the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity. Thoracic cavity, you know, chest region is the thoracic cavity. Inside that we could see the lungs as well as the heart. Below the diaphragm, we could see the abdominal cavity. Within the abdominal cavity, we could see stomach, kidney, pancreas, liver, small intestine, large intestine, etc., etc. So this is a diaphragm is the main structure that separates these two. And when we observe the three-dimensional view of the diaphragm, we could see a hole. That means the foot pipe is very close to windpipe. The foot pipe pierces through the diaphragm to reaches the stomach. That's it. This foot pipe, it pierces through the diaphragm to reaches the stomach. So this is the structure of human respiratory system. It begins with the external nostrils. Air passes through the nasal cavity. Through that it reaches the internal nostrils. Through it reaches the pharynx. As I told you, opening is there known as the glottis. Through the glottis, there reaches the larynx. Through the larynx, what happened? There reaches the trachea or the windpipe. It is covered with what? Cartilaginous rings to prevent, very, very important thing, prevent the windpipe from collapsing when air is not in it. And this trachea, it branches into two bronchi. Bronchi ends in bronchioles and other branch structures. At the end of the bronchioles, we could see small balloon-shaped structures or grape-like structures known as alveoli. And the main function of alveoli is the gaseous exchange. That's exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place inside the alveoli. And you know the location of the lungs. The lungs is, as I already told you, that they are very, very delicate structure. Say they need extra protection. The lungs is covered by another double-layered membrane. This membrane is known as the pleura. The name of the membrane is what? It is the pleura. This pleura protects the lungs. Not only that, the lungs are situated inside the rib cage. Here we could, when you touch your chest, you could feel the rib cage there. And middle one bone is there, that is known as the sternum. And the rib cage is composed of 12 pairs of curved bones. These all are structures that give extra protection to the lungs and the heart situated in the chest region. From this you can understand how delicate the structure of respiratory system is. Now if such a question comes for the examination to explain the location of lungs, how will you explain it? Lungs reside inside rib cage. I already mentioned it, above diaphragm, inside the thoracic cavity. Lungs reside inside rib cage, above diaphragm and inside the thoracic cavity. Now we can just study about the functions of hair and mucus. Can you guess where we can see this hair and mucus? Yes, you are absolutely right. Inside the external nostrils, we all feel hairs are there and mucus. Mucus is seen almost in different part of the internal structure of our body. And the function of mucus is to provide us what? Protection. So here, hairs and mucus in the nasal passage filter the air. Filtration, main function of hair and mucus. Second function is that they block dust particles from entering our body. We know that we are not inhaling the fresh air. We are taking the dust, smoke maybe sometimes, maybe full of dust particles. We can't say which type of air we are inhaling. So some structures or something should be there to protect our respiratory structure, because we already mentioned that that's a very delicate structure. So this function of hair and mucus, that doesn't mean these hairs and mucus can protect us from all the dust particles, bacteria, etc. To a certain extent only they can do their purpose, or they can serve the purpose of protection. Hairs and mucus in the nasal passage filter air. They block dust particles from entering our body. Now we can just mention about breathing rate, another one mark question for the examination. You all know what is breathing rate. It's the number of times a person breathes in 1 minute is known as the breathing rate. It may vary from a person to another. Then what's the breathing rate? It's the number of times a person breathes in 1 minute is known as the breathing rate. A normal breathing rate of an adult at rest is 12 to 20 breaths per minute. At rest only, 12 to 20. As I told you earlier, it can vary from one person to another depending upon the body structure and all. But while we are doing exercise, while climbing the stairs, or when we are having tension, such situations, the breathing rate normally increases. Here, this 12 to 20 is the breathing rate while we are at rest. It's for the adult only. It may vary, as I do, your children know, your breathing may be more than the adult. It depends upon the situations also. So breathing rate is the number of times a person breathes in 1 minute is known as the breathing rate. We can just note down the schematic representation of the parts of the human respiratory system. They are the external nostrils. It leads to nasal passage. Next, internal nostrils. Next is the pharynx. It leads to larynx, or otherwise known as the voice box. It leads to trachea and it reaches the bronchi, to bronchioles, and finally the alveoli. These are the main structures or parts of the human respiratory system. It includes both the tract as well as the organs. External nostrils, nasal passage, internal nostrils, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli. Please note down this schematic representation. It will be very helpful for you while you draw the diagram of human respiratory system. It's a very important diagram for the examination. So kindly learn to draw the diagram As you are having enough time now, please don't waste the time. Kindly learn to draw the diagram of human respiratory system and learn to label the parts also. Now you have realized the importance of respiratory system in human beings. Not only in human beings, all the organisms, the system is very, very important. Otherwise, no, without oxygen, people or organisms cannot survive. So the structure is very important. Even if you block the stomata also, the plants, they will die. You know why? Because they don't get oxygen. So to each and every organism, whether it's a plant or an animal, the respiratory system or respiratory pathway is very, very important. And it is very delicate also. It can be damaged very fast. That's the reason why it is kept inside, especially in the case of organisms, animals and birds, etc. and human beings also. So it is our responsibility to take care of this structure properly. The structure is already in a protected condition. It is our responsibility. You need to give extra care to this structure. Nowadays, we all know that it's a pandemic disease, that is COVID-19 or otherwise known as coronavirus disease. It's just spreading like anything. So it affects, when this virus enters our body, it affects our respiratory mechanism and it may lead to severe ill health. You know what it multiply more? The throat area, as I told you, pharynx, that area only. So if the doctors, if they wanted to check whether that person is having that COVID-19, they take the specimen from the throat and they will check it. If it is positive that that person may have that coronavirus disease or COVID-19. So the only thing that we are supposed to do it, we are supposed to break the chain. And how is it possible to break the chain? Practice social distancing. How is it possible? It's so simple. Stay home, then stay safe. If we stay home, we are not only protecting ourselves, we are protecting the whole community. We may not be the carrier of any such diseases. So, break the chain, practice social distancing, stay home, stay safe. Thank you. Have a nice day. My dear children, please stay home and stay safe always. Bye.